All right, today we're jumping into something pretty wild. We're looking at a provocative sermon that's been making waves because it connects a 2,500-year-old biblical prophecy directly to the future of American politics. So yeah, let's get right into it.
So let me just ask you this, right off the bat. What if the 2028 U.S. presidential election just never happens?
It sounds like a crazy question, right? But the sermon we're breaking down today, from a minister named Jomo K. Johnson, claims exactly that. And he's not just guessing. He believes it's all foretold in an ancient prophecy.
Okay, so to really get a grip on his argument, we have to go to the source. And for him, that source is a specific warning from the book of Daniel.
And here it is. This is the verse, Daniel 7:25, that's at the very heart of this whole thing. The minister builds his entire case on what he believes these specific lines mean for us right here, right now.
So here's his main point, laid out plain and simple. He argues that this verse isn't about some king from thousands of years ago. No, he believes it's a direct prophecy about Donald Trump, and that Trump will cancel the 2028 election to stay in power.
Okay, that's a huge leap, right? From an ancient text to a specific modern political prediction. So how does he connect those dots? Let's walk through his interpretation piece by piece.
All right, first up, speak great words against the Most High. Now, you might think that means someone yelling blasphemous things, but according to the minister, that's not it. He claims it's more subtle. It's about using words clothed in patriotism and baptized in religion to make political ambitions seem holy.
Now this next part, wear out the saints, is really interesting. The minister's take is that this isn't about physical harm. It's about a kind of exhaustion, a mental and spiritual fatigue from what he calls endless propaganda and the twisting of Scripture. The idea is that it wears people down so much, they start to doubt their own judgment.
And here's where it gets really specific. The line, think to change times and laws, well, in the minister's view, this points directly to the main event, canceling the 2028 election. He suggests it would be done by executive order, probably using the excuse of needing stability for the country.
So what about that last part of the verse, that cryptic phrase, a time and times in the dividing of time? In this kind of biblical interpretation, that's usually seen as code for 3.5 years. So the minister is claiming this prophesied rule, after the election is canceled, would last for 3.5 years.
So you gotta ask, how could something like this even happen? Well, that brings us to a really critical part of the sermon's argument. He puts a lot of the focus on what he calls the false church.
The sermon itself asks that very question. And the answer, according to the author, is that it wouldn't be possible, not without a powerful institution, basically enabling the whole thing from the inside.
And he doesn't hold back. He lays out some pretty serious claims here. He says a part of the American church has essentially changed the gospel to get political power. He talks about confusing loyalty to the country with faith in God, what he calls idolatry disguised as patriotism. And he even points to specific things like selling Bibles that include the U.S. Constitution as proof of this.
Okay, so with a warning this intense, what's the solution? What does the minister say people should do? Well, it's probably not what you're thinking. He's very clear that his call to action is about spiritual resistance, not a physical one.
Yeah, he draws a really hard line here. He's not calling for riots or violence or anything like that. Instead, he talks about a rebellion of the soul. And what does that mean? For him, it means publicly denouncing the leader. And when it comes down to it, choosing to obey God over obeying men.
All right, so where is all this heading? In the final part of his sermon, the minister lays out how he thinks this could actually play out, and he drops his most shocking conclusion.
He paints a pretty clear picture, a step-by-step path. Step 1, a national emergency is declared. Step 2, they announce a temporary delay to the election, just for 90 days or so. Step 3, that delay gets extended and extended, all for the sake of unity. And then, step 4, it becomes the new normal.
And this is where his whole argument lands. It all builds up to this final, huge claim. He concludes that Donald Trump isn't just an Antichrist figure, but is the final Antichrist prophesied in the Bible, the last one. That's the ultimate point of his entire interpretation.
This quote from the sermon really sums up his whole warning. Whenever the church weds itself to the throne, it gives birth to compromise. He believes the real root of the problem is when the church gets too close to political power, because, in his view, it always leads to compromise. And so his final message is basically a plea. He's calling for what he calls the true church to wake up,
to untangle itself from politics, to leave behind this political idolatry, and just get back to the gospel, before he says it's too late.
So that's the argument. You've got an ancient scripture being read as a direct roadmap from modern American politics. Now, whatever you personally believe about all this, it does make you think, doesn't it? It raises a really interesting question. What does this tell us about the power of prophecy? Why does it still have such a strong pull for so many people, even in this day and age?